The year was 2526, and the Galactic Confederation had turned interstellar politics into a spectator sport. Every 3 years, representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered on the neutral planet Creones, for the Galactic Combat Summit, a tournament where disputes were settled not with diplomacy or warfare, but with fists, claws, tentacles, and whatever other appendage a species had evolved to fight with. This year's tournament had drawn a record crowd. 50,000 spectators packed the crystalline arena, while billions more watched through holographic feeds across the galaxy. Among the sea of diverse alien forms, creatures made of liquid metal, beings composed of living energy, six-limbed warriors with exoskeletons. One figure stood out for her complete lack of intimidating features. Dr. Irene Sunwalker represented Earth, though few could believe it. She wore a simple jumpsuit, her brown hair tied back in a practical bun. Most curious were the antique spectacles perched on her nose, an anachronism in an age where vision correction was as routine as getting a haircut. While other competitors flexed muscles that could crush steel or demonstrated energy blasts that could melt rock, Irene simply stood quietly, occasionally pushing her glasses up her nose. "Is this a joke?" rumbled a crystalline being from the audience. "The humans finally show their faces," hissed a reptilian spectator. "And they send a scientist?" The crowd's confusion turned to open mockery when the tournament brackets were announced. Irene was scheduled to face some of the galaxy's most feared warriors. But the loudest reaction came when they announced the defending champion. Grolger the Invincible strode onto the stage like a force of nature. Standing 4 meters tall, his Ardhan physiology made him appear like a living tank. His exoskeleton gleamed with biometallic plating harder than tungsten. Segmented arms, ending in massive fists, made small earthquakes with each step. He had won the tournament 3 consecutive times, each victory more spectacular than the last. "Behold!" Grolger's voice boomed across the arena. "The pathetic creature that Earth sends to challenge us." He pointed directly at Irene, his massive digit nearly the size of her entire arm. "Look at this. This. Human. No claws, no armor, no energy weapons. I shall break her in half with 1 finger." The crowd erupted in laughter. Several species began taking bets on how quickly Irene would surrender. The holographic feeds replayed Grolger's proclamation in dozens of languages, each translation carrying the same mocking tone. Irene, for her part, remained calm. She adjusted her glasses and met Grolger's gaze, something flickering behind her eyes that no one seemed to notice. "We'll see about that," she said quietly, though her words were drowned out by the crowd's laughter. Behind the scenes, Earth's embassy had authorized the mission with strict parameters. Humanity had discovered something extraordinary about their species. A small percentage had developed psychokinetic abilities. The government had kept this secret for decades, watching as galaxy politics placed them among the lesser species. Now, they needed to know, how would the galaxy react if Earth suddenly wasn't so weak? The preliminary rounds began the next day. Irene's first opponent was a signet warrior named Shrillwing. These avian humanoids used focused sonic waves to disorient and paralyze their enemies. The match seemed to start promisingly for Shrillwing. She unleashed a barrage of destructive sound that should have left Irene writhing on the ground. Instead, something impossible happened. The sonic waves bent around Irene like water flowing around a rock. Shrillwing intensified her assault, creating frequencies that could shatter adamantium. Yet Irene remained unaffected, walking forward as if through a light breeze. In her confusion, Shrillwing attempted an aerial attack, only to suddenly slip in midair, tumbling ungracefully to the arena floor and crashing hard enough to forfeit the match. Lucky, the commentators declared. The human got lucky. Her second match was against Nexus 7, a cybernetic entity that was 70% biological, 30% machine, legal for combat under the tournament's complex rules. Nexus 7's combat protocols made it nearly unbeatable. Its plasma cannons could punch through ship hulls, and its predictive algorithms could calculate an opponent's moves milliseconds before they made them. The match began with Nexus 7 unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts. Each shot, guided by complex targeting systems, should have been impossible to dodge. Yet each bolt veered away from Irene at the last moment, as if deflected by invisible barriers. When Nexus 7 attempted close combat, its strikes went wide despite its flawless targeting systems. The cybernetic warrior's processors overheated, trying to compensate for errors that shouldn't exist. System malfunction, it's automated. Voice crackled. Combat protocols compromised. I forfeit. The audience, still largely dismissive, whispered about equipment failures and coincidences. But some of the more observant spectators began to notice a pattern. Every attack that should have hit Irene didn't. Every mistake her opponents made seemed to happen at precisely the wrong moment for them. Grulger watched these matches with increasing irritation. Pathetic. He growled to his entourage of sycophants. She's barely doing anything. My opponents, at least, had the dignity to be defeated by superior force. Behind closed doors, however, tournament officials launched an investigation. They scanned Irene's body for hidden technology, energy weapons, or any equipment that might explain her victories. They found nothing. When questioned, Irene simply said, "I'm applying basic principles of physics." Nothing more. The officials weren't satisfied. Pressure mounted from various galactic powers, particularly those allied with the Arthans, Grulger species. Humanity must explain their secret weapon, demanded an Arhan delegate, or be disqualified for cheating. But Irene had passed every scan. No evidence of fraud existed. The tournament continued. As nights fell on Creones 4, Irene lay awake in her quarters, wrestling with the weight of her mission. She thought of Earth's leaders, how they'd briefed her on humanity's discovery. 1 in every 100 humans had some level of psychokinetic ability, the power to influence matter with thought alone. Most could barely move small objects. A rare few, like herself, had refined the ability to incredible levels. "We've kept this secret for 70 years, the Secretary General had told her. "We're seen as primitives, weak, barely worth respecting. But if the galaxy discovers we can manipulate reality with our minds..." He hadn't needed to finish. Fear could be as dangerous as contempt. The quarterfinals arrived, pitting Irene against Krell, the Earthshaker from the planet Loktar. His species could generate electromagnetic fields powerful enough to warp metal. The arena's reinforced structure groaned as Krell demonstrated his power, bending the support beams with casual gestures. "Your tricks won't work on me, human," Krell boomed. "I can sense every energy field in this room. I'll collapse your invisible defenses." The match began with explosive violence. Krell unleashed waves of electromagnetic force that caused monitoring equipment to go haywire. The very air crackled with power. Yet as each wave approached Irene, it seemed to dissipate harmlessly, like ocean waves breaking against an unshakable cliff. In frustration, Krell attempted to use his power to physically restrain Irene, wrapping her in fields that should have crushed her like a tin can. Instead, for one brief moment captured by ultra-high-speed cameras, a small piece of debris seemed to defy gravity, floating between them before shooting straight at Krell's midsection. The impact staggered him, breaking his concentration. In that moment of vulnerability, Irene stepped forward. "I suggest you yield," she said quietly. "Your electromagnetic tricks are useless against someone who understands forces you can't even perceive." Krell, dazed and confused, reluctantly surrendered. The stadium erupted in a mix of cheers and heated arguments. The replay of the floating debris was shown hundreds of times, with experts debating whether it was evidence of unknown technology or simple coincidence. "Impossible," growled Grulger, watching from his viewing box. But for the first time, doubt crept into his thoughts. These couldn't all be coincidences. The galaxy began to take notice. News feeds across hundreds of worlds buzzed with speculation. Anonymous scientists posted theories about hidden human technology. Conspiracy theorists claimed Earth had discovered ancient artifacts. Some governments quietly began reassessing their intelligence on humanity. Meanwhile, the Ardhan ambassador called for an emergency council meeting. "The humans are deceiving us," he declared. "They possess weapons technology beyond approved parameters." "You have no proof," Earth's ambassador responded calmly. "Perhaps your champion is simply afraid of losing." The accusation echoed through the council chambers. For 3 years, Grolger had dominated the tournament. His victories were expected, almost routine. Now, his supremacy was being questioned by a seemingly powerless human scientist. Grolger's response came through official channels. "I will fight her in the semifinals," he announced. "I will show the galaxy what happens to pretenders who challenge Arhan supremacy." The arena's attendance record shattered. Temporary seating was erected to accommodate the flood of spectators. Betting establishments saw their highest volume in decades, though the odds increasingly favored Grolger's victory. After all, his previous opponents had been formidable warriors. Irene was still seen as an anomaly at best, a cheater at worst. The semifinal match arrived amid unprecedented tension. Grolger entered the arena to thunderous applause from Arhan supporters. His exoskeleton had been polished to mirror brilliance, catching stadium lights in dazzling displays. With each step, the arena's reinforced floor cracked slightly under his massive weight. Irene entered from the opposite side. Her appearance was unchanged. Simple jumpsuit, practical hairstyle, those anachronistic glasses. She seemed impossibly small against the massive Arhan champion. Finally, Grolger's voice boomed across the arena. "I faced this pretender directly. Let me show you what real power looks like." Without warning, he charged. His speed was terrifying for something so large, crossing half the arena in seconds. His first punch created a shockwave that rattled the entire stadium. Spectators in the front rows were pushed back in their seats. But Irene wasn't there. She had sidestepped with minimal movement, causing Grolger's massive fist to crater the arena floor where she had stood milliseconds before. "Stand still, coward," Grolger roared, unleashing a barrage of strikes. Each punch could pulverize stone. Each kick could demolish buildings. Yet Irene danced between them with minimal effort, sometimes appearing to predict his movements before he made them. "Are you running away, human?" Grolger mocked, though sweat began forming beneath his exoskeleton. "Is this the sum of Earth's secret weapon? Evasion." In frustration, Grolger grabbed a support column, ripping it free and swinging it like a massive club. The crowd gasped as the improvised weapon whistled through the air. The camera feeds captured it perfectly. The trajectory was flawless, unavoidable. Yet the column veered off course at the last moment, as if deflected by an invisible hand. It struck the arena's protective barrier instead, the impact sending fractures through the energy field. "Enough games!" Grolger threw aside the column. "Face my power directly." He raised both arms, preparing to bring them down with enough force to collapse the entire platform. This was the moment the ultra-high-definition cameras captured the impossible. For a fraction of a second, visible distortions appeared in the air around Irene, like heat waves, but moving with purpose, flowing patterns that seemed to respond to her thoughts. Grolger's massive arms began their descent. Death from above, unstoppable, overwhelming. The crowd held its breath. This was the end of the human's mysterious run. But halfway through his attack, Grolger suddenly stopped. His arms froze in midair, muscles straining against an invisible resistance. His face contorted with effort and confusion. "What? What is this?" he gasped. For the first time in his career, Grolger the Invincible looked afraid. Irene stood perfectly still, except for her eyes. Behind her glasses, her pupils dilated slightly. The air around her continued to shimmer with those subtle distortions. Slowly, deliberately, she raised one finger. What happened next became the most replayed moment in tournament history. Grolger's arms, despite his immense strength, slowly began bending backward. The angle was wrong, defying the natural motion of his joints. The Arhan champion roared in pain and confusion as his own anatomy betrayed him. His exoskeleton, designed to protect him, now became a prison as forces beyond his comprehension manipulated his very structure. "You want to see power?" Irene's voice cut through his roars. "Power isn't always about size or strength. Sometimes it's about understanding the forces that govern reality. With a visible effort of will, she clenched her raised finger into a fist. The invisible forces intensified. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Grolger's arms were forced further back, approaching a breaking point that shouldn't be possible given his biology. "Surrender," Irene said simply, "or I'll show you what happens when someone pushes fundamental forces too far." For a moment, pride warred with self-preservation in Grolger's mind. Then, the realization hit him. If she could control his movement, she could do so much worse. The mighty Ardhan champion had never felt helpless before. But now, immobilized by invisible forces he couldn't fight, couldn't even see, terror replaced his anger. "I yield," he gasped. The words seemed to tear from his throat. Immediately, the invisible forces released him. Grolger stumbled forward, rubbing his arms in disbelief. His exoskeleton was intact, but his spirit, that had been broken. The arena remained silent for a heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Half the crowd cheered wildly, while others stood in shocked disbelief. Commentators struggled to find words to describe what they'd witnessed. Alien species, some of which had never before considered humanity worthy of attention, began excited discussions in hundreds of languages. In her viewing box, Earth's ambassador maintained careful diplomatic composure, though her hands trembled slightly. This was the moment they prepared for. The aftermath spread across the galaxy like ripples in a cosmic pond. Emergency sessions were called in various government chambers. Military strategists reassessed their databases on human capabilities. Scientists demanded explanations for phenomena that defied their understanding of physics. Earth's secrets could no longer remain hidden. In a carefully orchestrated press conference, Dr. Irene Sunwalker explained what the galaxy had witnessed. The cameras captured every word, every gesture, as she spoke of humanity's hidden gift. "For centuries, your species have watched as humanity struggled, fought, and overcame challenges despite being seen as primitive," she began. "What the galaxy didn't know was that a small percentage of our population possesses the ability to influence matter with thought alone, psychokinesis. I am one of approximately 8 people whose ability has developed beyond moving small objects." The room buzzed with translation devices, converting her words into hundreds of languages. "We kept this secret not for conquest or power, but for survival. History has shown us that fear often precedes conflict. We chose to prove our worth through human qualities, perseverance, intelligence, and creativity, rather than supernatural abilities." She paused, adjusting her glasses in what had become her signature gesture. "Today, we stand revealed not to declare superiority, but to offer partnership. The universe is vast enough for many kinds of power. We hope for understanding rather than fear." The implications rippled through galactic society. Trade agreements, pending Earth's approval, suddenly moved to the top priority. Military alliances began extending invitations that had been denied for decades. Universities across the galaxy requested exchange programs with Earth's leading science institutions. Grolger, recovering in a medical facility, found himself approached by numerous species seeking to learn about humility. His arms were undamaged. Irene had been precise in her application of force, but his pride would take longer to heal. Eventually, he would channel his experience into diplomatic work, becoming an unexpected advocate for understanding between species. The former champion's memoir, titled "The Day My Arm Learned Humility," became a bestseller in 17 galactic sectors, though he never quite lived down the viral holograms of his defeat. The image of the mighty warrior frozen by an invisible force, while Irene stood motionless with her finger raised, became a symbol across cultures, a reminder that power takes many forms. As the tournament continued, Irene advanced to the final round against Vokath, the Mindrender, a psyche species with formidable mental abilities. The match was anticlimactic compared to her confrontation with Grolger. When Vokath attempted to assault her mind, he found himself blocked by defenses as unbreakable as any physical barrier. The psychic warrior conceded gracefully, recognizing a kindred force. The trophy ceremony saw Irene crowned as the first human champion in the tournament's 500-year history. But more significantly, it marked Earth's emergence from the shadows of galactic politics. Returning to Earth, Irene was greeted not as a warrior, but as a bridge between worlds. The small percentage of humanity with psychokinetic abilities no longer needed to hide. Training programs were quietly established, with safety and ethics emphasized above all. 6 months after the tournament, as alien dignitaries visited Earth's newly revealed facilities, Irene received a personal message. It came through diplomatic channels, marked with the seal of the Ardhan Council. The message was simple: "Thank you for the lesson, Grulger." Attached was an image, Grulger surrounded by young Ardhan students, teaching them about the danger of underestimating others. Irene smiled, pushing up her glasses. She replied with equal brevity, "The universe is full of surprises. Perhaps now we could discover them together." The galaxy had learned that humanity, often dismissed as primitive, possessed powers that challenged the foundations of known physics. But more importantly, they learned that true strength lay not in dominance, but in the wisdom to use power with restraint. In the years that followed, the phrase breaking someone's arm without moving your feet entered galactic common parlance. It spoke not of violence, but of achieving the impossible through means others never considered. The tournament continued annually, but its nature evolved. What began as a brutish display of physical dominance gradually incorporated tests of mental ability, strategic thinking, and even diplomatic skill. Humanity didn't dominate these new competitions. They participated as equals alongside hundreds of other species. And sometimes, just sometimes, Irene would adjust her glasses and smile mysteriously when asked about Earth's sudden emergence as a galactic power. Because she knew, as did an increasing number of her fellow humans, that they hadn't suddenly become powerful at all. They had simply stopped hiding what they were. The universe, vast and incomprehensible, held endless mysteries. But on this day, in this moment, one mystery had been solved. Humanity was not among the lesser species. They never had been. They had simply been underestimated. And in a cosmos full of beings who measured worth by physical power alone, that underestimation had been their greatest defense, until the day it became unnecessary. The alien champion had pointed and laughed. The human scientist had broken his arm without moving her feet. And the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The stars continued their eternal dance, unchanged by mortal conflicts. But the patterns of power among those who navigated between them had shifted forever. Where once humanity walked in Earth's shadow, they now strode among the stars as equals, their hidden strength finally revealed. And somewhere in the cosmic archive of memorable moments, the image remained. Grulger the Invincible, frozen mid-strike by invisible forces, while Dr. Irene Sunwalker stood motionless, adjusting her glasses with calm confidence. The universe, as Irene had noted long ago, was indeed full of irony. But sometimes, just sometimes, that irony served justice rather than cruel humor. In the end, the greatest victory wasn't in breaking limbs with telekinetic force. It was in breaking the broken perspective that had kept an entire species hidden in the shadows of their own potential. And that, as any good scientist would tell you, was a far more significant achievement than any trophy could represent.